What is displaced aggression? So hi, welcome. One of the things we're going to talk about today is a thing called displaced aggression. Now, it's a concept that's very, very relevant for us when we're talking about conflict management, we're talking about negotiation skills, we're talking about basically not having to become physical if we can possibly help it. So when we look at soft skills and when we look at the de-escalation of an aggressive encounter that could become violent, then it's helpful for us to understand some of the terminology and the things that can be at play. Often this isn't always obvious. And so quite often what you'll find is this particular thing, displaced aggression, is actually the reason behind what's happening, as opposed to something that you may have done. So if we look at this and we think, okay, how do we best explain this? Well, essentially, displaced aggression is where somebody takes their bad mood out on somebody else for something that somebody else has done. So as an example of that, it could be that I've had a really rubbish day for whatever reason, and because of that, I'm in a very unpleasant mood. I'm looking for somebody to sort of let that out on, and it just so happens that that's you. Now, when you're in that kind of situation, it's worth understanding this, because then you have a better idea of what you need to do to manage that particular situation. So if we put that into perspective, right, so let's just break this down and explain it a bit more, right? So if we take something like road rage as an example, the majority of road rage incidents are because of this phenomenon. They're because of a thing called displaced aggression. So again, if we picture the scene and we say, okay, there's a guy, he's woken up, he's late, his alarm didn't go off, he's got 15 minutes and he's supposed to be at work, and he's just literally just got out of bed. When he does get out of bed, he's greeted by his wife, who's in a really bad mood. She's yelling at him, she's shouting at him, she's really not happy, and this is now leveled on top. He goes out towards the front door to be met with a load of envelopes, most of them demanding money. His bills haven't been met, so he's stressing about finances as well. He then goes out to the car. The car's old, the car's not in great condition, the car takes a while to start, it doesn't want to start. So again, the frustration is mounting. He finally gets the car going, and then he backs out into the road and starts off on his journey. Now, as he gets to the corner of the street, you happen to just go past and block him off a little bit. Now, any other day, that wouldn't make a difference. Any other day, it would just be, oh, okay, a little wave of the hand, a little acknowledgement, and everyone would just get on with their day. But today, because he's had all this build up, because he's late for work, because he's in a mood, because he's been shouted at, because he can't pay his bills, because his car's a piece of crap, for all those reasons, he's decided that this has got to be vented somewhere. This has got to come out. All of this has got to literally erupt. And unfortunately, it's you he's going to erupt on. Now, when we look at that and we think, okay, well, if we look at the flip side of that, now actually what we've got is we've got a guy who's rolled out of bed. It's a lovely Sunday, beautiful sun coming through the window. The day is his own, right? He looks over and he's got the gorgeous wife led next to him, who's happy and smiling and contented. He looks out of his bedroom window to see a lovely, brand new, posh, reliable car parked on his driveway, and they decide to basically go for a lovely picnic out in the countryside. So they get in the car and off they go, and exactly the same occurrence happens. Now this time, nothing becomes of it. Exactly that. There's a wave, there's an acknowledgement, everybody's happy and just goes off on their way. And therein lies the main fundamental difference with this displaced aggression when it comes to confrontational situations, because we've got to be aware that quite often the actual thing that the person's aggressive about, the actual thing that the person is shouting about, is not actually the core problem. It's not actually that which is what they're angry or upset about. That just happens to be the thing that they're using to disguise the fact that they've got this anger they want to vent in a different way. So once we understand that, and once we realize that that's what that is, then we can work with that, and it's something that we can use, right? But first we have to establish that that is the case. So when we look at efficient conflict management technique, what we're trying to do is identify what the problems are so that we can solve them. Now, I don't mean solve them in regards to being able to fix whatever the problem is. I don't mean that. But what I mean is to be able to get ourselves away from that confrontation as safely as possible and to not have to escalate it so that it becomes physical, right? So in this particular instance, if we take this guy and if we take the fact that he's angry, he's had a rough day already and it's not even barely began, if we understand all of those things, then we can acknowledge that and we can say, hey, do you know what? I know it's not me he's really shouting at, and I also know that it's not because of this particular thing. And so I've just got to keep that in my mind. Now, as long as I know that, I can now work with that. And so that's just one example of understanding the situation and reading where you are and how that communication has panned out. It's just one example of how that can be useful and how we can then put that into our toolbox, if you like, for if we do need to have these kind of confrontations, then we know that that thing exists in the world. We know that we can look out for that, and we know that we can then work with that knowledge once we've established what the core issues actually really are.